Welcome to episode 4 of the Animal Chat podcast with me, Matthew Payne.
And me, Harry Ekman. How's it going, Matt?
It's going really well, Harry. How about you, mate?
I'm doing really well. How's the podcast going? I see you've been looking at some figures.
Harry, well, I know we both want to say a huge thank you to everyone that has downloaded and listened to us, a pair of morons, talking about animals with some amazing guests.
Absolutely.
We are
blown away by the number of people that have been listening to the podcast so far.
It's crazy. I mean, we need to thank people from Sri Lanka, Colombia, India. People are listening to us in Mexico, throughout Europe. It's unbelievable. I'm blown away, and we've only been doing it for, by the time this podcast comes out, a couple of weeks. So
That's amazing.
It is incredible. And just remember, everyone, that you can listen to episode 1, 2, and 3 if you haven't listened to all 3 yet. They're still available. We've got Tim Harrison on episode 2 and the amazing Lola Webber on episode 3. Before we go on to our guest today, Harry, I know we wanted to speak about a few of our most important followers. I mean, we have gone global, haven't we, Harry?
We have spread around the world like some kind of virus. Too soon?
Oh, God. Well, it's in there now, isn't it? So,
it's out there now.
Listen,
okay.
After Colombia disappear and Canada and Sri Lanka no longer listen to us, we'll understand whether that works or not. As you know, we have social media pages, Facebook. We have some very passionate, interesting fans. We are building quite a female support base on Twitter. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
We are. It's very strange. And yeah, for example, Charlotte71596, she's very friendly. She's looking for some fun. Wants to get to know her personally. And I mean, I think this is forward, but maybe this is me being British. But she says that if we follow her, she'll send us a nude photo.
Wow, that's amazing. What was her name again? Charlotte what?
Charlotte_71596.
Not 596. No, I dated 95 once.
Oh, mate!
But this must be her sister.
Yeah, it must be. But she just, I mean,
it's a memorable surname.
Yeah, she, as she quotes herself, has never been your average girl.
Well, she wouldn't be listening to this podcast.
No, yeah. I'm not going to tell you what flavour her favourite soda is, because that's
It's dog meat. It's dog meat, isn't it?
Oh, goodness. So, yeah. Thank you, Charlotte, for your continued support on social media.
She's not our typical demographic. I'll give you that.
Yeah. But you know what? This
she wasn't who we were expecting to be listening to this podcast.
We're transcending demographics, Harry. We are reaching out people all around the world. So, but in order to thank you to everyone that has downloaded our podcast. I can't tell you how odd it is to think that people in Singapore and South Korea are actually listening to Harry and I and these amazing guests. It's so weird. So
it's amazing. It really is. Yeah. Thank you so much for everybody that's listening, particularly like the people that have given us support and encouragement to even do this in the first place. It means a huge amount.
Yeah, it really, really does. And like I say, please, if you've listened to one of the episodes, check out some of the other ones. Share. Don't forget to subscribe and follow and review and all that stuff, because it helps us get more listeners. So thank you so much to everyone. So in episode 3 last week, Harry and I had the absolute privilege of speaking to Lola Webber. If you haven't listened to that one, please listen to it. Lola is an absolute inspiration. It's the first time I actually met Lola, and I was blown away. I know she's part of Change for Animals, which Harry is the president, CEO? What's your title?
CEO, co-founder.
Wow.
Co-founder and CEO.
Hello. So yeah, we had the absolute pleasure of speaking to Lola. And Lola, if you haven't listened to it, talked to us about a really emotional topic, the dog meat trade in Asia, and her incredible efforts to basically end it across the region. So this time, though, we're going to sort of stay for this episode in the same region, but we're going to look at another dog project run by the incredible Mark and Sam at Dogstar. They really are global leaders when it comes to dog welfare projects. And I know you, Harry, have known them for some time. So
yeah, sure. Samantha Green and Mark Green, husband and wife team from the UK. I've known them for, must be 9 years or more now, from the early days of when they set up their project Dogstar Foundation. So they're a couple who moved over to Sri Lanka, and they'll talk about their own story. But what they've managed to build over there, from the beginnings of just helping one single dog to turning into one of possibly the best dog population management projects going on in the world today. The numbers of animals they've helped are staggering. The impact they're having in Sri Lanka is incredible. Their story is really inspiring, what led them to go to Sri Lanka in the first place. And they're also just really lovely people. So it's really exciting to have been able to chat to them and find out their story and be able to share that with everybody. So I suppose now would be a good time to just listen in and enjoy the podcast.
I think one of the main motivations for Harry and I starting this podcast is learning about the people. How did you end up in Sri Lanka? I know it's quite a broad question, but how did you both end up where you are now in Sri Lanka? Where did that journey start for you?
Totally by accident is the short answer. The slightly longer answer.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it could have been any country in the world. We both worked on the London Underground, and we were heavily impacted by the tube bombings in 2005. I worked on the Aldgate site. Samantha worked on the Edgware Road site as engineering staff, and we worked with the police and everybody else. And to sort of cut a long story short, Samantha ended up leaving London Underground a little while after because of reorganisations and everything else, and needed to do a bit of self-healing, really. So someone just mentioned Sri Lanka to her.
Yeah, someone mentioned Sri Lanka. So, yeah, I mean, like Mark said, we'd been involved in the tube bombings. We'd worked within the scene of crime with the police. It was, though we were railway staff and we were engineering coordinators, and I, at that point, ran an engineering control room that used to respond to all things that had broken. So the actual engineering part of it was familiar, but suddenly being in the middle of a terrorist attack and the crime scene and all of the sort of emergency services set up for us was really confronting. And I think anyone who lived in London at the time was shocked by the 2005 bombings. But I think when you were working inside the crime scene, and that was on the trains that had been bombed and with the victims who were still in situ, and to see their personal belongings and to see things as benign as a handbag or a mobile phone, and to sort of think, well, gosh, somebody left work or they left home this morning to go to work, and they probably argued with their spouse about whose turn it was to put the bins out. And
it's a very odd, very uncomfortable feeling.
Almost
honest,
faces your mortality, I think. I think that because of that, and the company was reorganising, and there was an opportunity for me to step out from my work. And as Mark said, we were both probably quite broken individuals, I would say.
You don't always know it at the time, though.
No.
Yeah.
Keep calm and carry on.
Stiff British upper lip.
Yeah, and possibly, I think we would be honest to say, probably both had post-traumatic stress disorder, but we're not admitting it. So, yeah, very much for me, I was going to take a few months off, and my plan was to sort of get back into work later in the year, do more of the same with rail consulting. And somebody had mentioned Sri Lanka, and they'd mentioned volunteering, and I'd never done a gap year. I'd left school at 16 and gone straight to the railways, as Mark had. And it just seemed a really good idea just to travel for 8 weeks.
Oh, how misguided that was.
Yeah. That's what I said. And so that was generally the plan, was just to come and travel around on my own. And it was sort of pre-smartphones, pre-internet, pre-Facebook. So it was very sort of solo travel. I used to phone in once a week. I used to get a little scratch card. I'd have to phone a number and get put through with the international operator. So the whole idea was I would just take 8 weeks off from everything and then come back and get another job. And that
8
was,
weeks. 8 weeks. That's all it was. She couldn't even be left alone for that long.
I actually am proud to say that I lasted an entire 28 days before I set the charity up. So I think that's quite impressive.
What were you doing the previous 27?
I was just building up to it.
Getting
getting over the jet lag.
I mean, we had always done things with rescue dogs and things before. We used to, prior to all of this, we used to volunteer at a greyhound rescue, cleaning out kennels at weekends and bits and pieces
Walking
like that.
dogs.
Walking dogs. So,
and fostering dogs.
yeah, so we weren't sort of unfamiliar with animal welfare, animal rescue and such.
But more from a volunteering perspective. And
it's just when Sam came over to Sri Lanka, it all went a bit mad, really.
So what was that moment that, you said 28 days in? What was the trigger? What was the moment that made you realise that, you wanted to do something over in Sri Lanka? Was it a single event or was it a gradual experience?
I think it was a bit of both. There was a gradual experience in that I saw street dogs everywhere. And if you sort of travel to Asia, you will see street dogs. They're on every corner. They're just part of the fabric of life. And if you come from the UK, where stray dogs aren't tolerated and they're picked up and taken away, just seeing dogs on the street is really confronting. And even though some of those dogs have actually quite good welfare, it's just that, oh my gosh, there are dogs everywhere.
But then there was one particular dog. Your little heart dog.
My little heart dog. But I think I'd spent the first 27 days saying to people, there's a lot of dogs around here. Someone should really do something about this. There's a lot of, quite sick dogs and quite emaciated dogs. And as part of the work I was doing over here, I was volunteering for another organisation. I'd been asked with a group of other travellers if we would just do some conversational English classes with some children in a temple every afternoon at 4:00. And these were kids that were learning English at school, and could we just go and sit and talk to them? And we were doing that, and we'd go into this temple every day. All the kids would be there, very, very loud, excited. So never really saw what the temple looked like without lots of children running around. And on this particular day, and it was September 28th, 2006.
Etched into her memory.
Etched into my memory. I had a bit of a headache, and I said to some of the others, I'm just going to sit outside for 10 minutes because there's a lot of excited kids here. And I'd basically come to the realisation at that point that I was never going to be a teacher. That was definitely what was not going to happen. And I was sitting on the temple steps, and for the first time I was sort of sitting in the temple on my own, and I saw these dogs, and they were very, very small puppies, and they were looking at me and I was looking at them, and they were small, sort of 3-4 week old puppies. And one of them decided that it would get very brave and come over, and then sort of jumped onto my lap and threw itself upside down, and it was like, look at me, I'm just the cutest thing ever. And she was. And I think at that point I was like, oh gosh, these are tiny little puppies that are way too small. There's no mummy dog around. And
you didn't mention the fleas that were jumping off this cute.
And that was the thing. This puppy was absolutely covered with fleas. And at that point, I'd already been flea treating a dog that was at my boarding house, and I'd got Mark to send some Frontline over from the UK. So I'm sitting there working out that if I go back and get one tube of Frontline and I put it on all these puppies, that could be my good deed for the day. And then I'm sitting there thinking, can you even put Frontline on puppies that are that small? But I thought, well, there's bound to be a little leaflet in the box. I'll have a look. So I just decided to just do my good deed for the day and go and get some Frontline for these puppies. And I asked somebody at where I was living if they would help me explain to the monk what I was doing.
This is where Samantha's deep secret comes out. She lied to a monk.
I didn't lie. I didn't know the truth. There's a difference. So first of all, I'm going to phone the monk, and I'm like, wow, monks have got phones. This is like, my whole experience of monks was like kung fu, Shaolin monks. So I'm like, monks have got phones? Wow, this is amazing. So, and I don't know that I explained to the guy what I was doing. I don't know what he told the monks. I mean, probably all three of us had massive miscommunication. I don't think anybody knew what was going on. But I went back to the temple, and I had sort of, decided that I was going to apply this Frontline onto these puppies. And as I'm frontlining these puppies, the monk comes over, and this is where I had,
"What are you doing, madam?" is what he said.
and I said, I'm putting some medicine on the dogs to get rid of the insects. And he said, will it do any harm? And I said, not to the dogs, no. Thinking, I don't know, are you allowed to kill fleas in a temple? I don't know. Thinking of some sort of diplomatic incident. And he sort of looked at me for a long time, and I thought, God, this guy knows what frontline is. I'm busted. Like, I'm absolutely in trouble now. And after what seemed like a long time, he said to me, I have another dog that needs medicine. Will you come? And I sort of walked around the back of this sort of temple with this monk, clutching my tube of frontline. And he just presented me with a dog that was just, well, at that point was the worst dog I had ever seen in my life. It was an emaciated dog that had almost no fur whatsoever. She had incredibly bad mange and a broken leg and some open sores. And she was just laying on a flour sack. And as Mark likes to say, what did he say to me?
You will make her better, no?
And I was
think Sam's reaction, holding a tube of frontline, was, not with this, I won't. No.
And I think that, I was very much going to say to him, no, absolutely not am I going to make your dog better with a tube of frontline. And he said it again. And he seemed very convinced about this. And then I looked at the dog, and then she looked at me, and she looked into me. She absolutely, this dog, every ounce of suffering in her life was visible in her eyes at that point. And even though I was standing in a foreign country that I had no language capacity for, I just found myself saying yes, because it seemed to be the only thing that I could say. And then I had to sort of work out how I was going to make good on that promise. And by complete luck, I had met a vet who was working at the university here a couple of weeks previously, and I got somebody who knew him to phone him and explain the situation. And he was sort of, this is very common. These dogs are everywhere, but yes, we can come and help you. And there was actually a team from his university that had been out attending an elephant, and he just said, look, these guys can come and help you, and they'll see what they can do. And that was really where it started. They did come out. They did help me with the dog. They certainly saved her life.
See, I would have done a runner. I'd have said to them, yeah, sure, no problem, mate. Back in a little while, and legged it. And I think Sam might have thought about doing it, but when she said that she would go and get help, basically the monk just stood there and said, good, I will sit and wait for you.
Yeah, he did.
And he then sat down next to this dog and basically wasn't going to move until she came back later.
And I think it was about 4.5 hours I got back, and he was still sitting on the stool next to the dog, sort of fanning her. So I think, if I hadn't have gone back, he would have sat there all night. And then really that was all the same night. That was all the same day. And the next morning I woke up and I just had this idea that it would be really difficult to leave in 4 weeks and not have anything in place for this dog and the other dogs at his temple. And just had the idea for setting something up that would be longer term than just treating this one dog.
She sent me a text.
I did. I sent you a text.
And I didn't keep it, unfortunately, but the text was basically, hello, dear, we're going to employ a vet. It will cost us £40 a month.
45?
Oh, 45
I was realistic.
But it will have no other impact on us.
That was literally it. Through this vet I'd met at the university, he'd sort of said, look, one of our graduates is just literally finishing his training. He's coming to the local area to set up his own practice, and if you speak to him and you could set something up, and that was what I'd agreed. For £45 a month, he was going to come out, treat the dogs at the temple, do some sterilizations, look after some, and it was going to be this very small scale thing with us just privately funding this sort of local vet. And within days, it became evident that there was a much bigger need. Everywhere I looked, it was overpopulation was the problem. Every problem that there was, overpopulation was the cause of it. And that's when we started to really think about spay neuter. But even then, it was still quite low level. It was still around those villages and those monks.
It was just pure chance it was Sri Lanka.
And pure chance.
It just could have been any country in the world, really.
It could have been. But I did ask the monk why he asked me of all the people that he'd ever seen in the temple. And he did a bit of an eat, pray, love moment on me. And he said, I asked you because I'd been waiting for you for a long time and I knew you would help. So hard to say no.
I talk about guilt,
Do you think that, I mean, obviously you were saying before about you getting away from the trauma that you'd experienced in London, and it was an opportunity to escape and kind of come to peace with that, or at least come to some kind of acceptance of that. I guess I can't imagine what that must have been like for you. But do you think that, I mean, that must have played a part in the way that you saw the situation there, saw a need, and saw an opportunity to help? Do you think if you had gone there in a different situation, you would have seen things differently? How much of that experience in London do you think played a part in the way you felt and the choice that you made
I think
there?
a lot. I think that prior to the tube bombings, we were corporate people, weren't we?
First in the office, last out of the office, always volunteering for the extra bits. You spend all your time working and everything else. And I think the experience from the bombing and the realisation of the impact of that, and then this other element, I think we definitely did look at it with very different eyes, to be honest.
And I think because it was such a well publicised event and lots of the victims' families gave interviews to the press and to the media, you really got to know about the people that were involved, and you got to know about their lives, and it was very difficult, I think, to realise that all of those people had full and meaningful lives, had died in a really tragically, violent attack. And I think it was also, there were a lot of people were very angry, and I think we were really careful. We didn't want to be angry about afterwards, and it was hard because when you've seen the things you've seen, it can be difficult. But we didn't want to be defined by that anger, and we didn't want to be bitter or to start becoming frightened of individuals or subsections of society. So I think that probably coming out to another country with that sort of work is not everything as we thought, and possibly
not the be all and end all that you always think it is.
And I think the other thing we both said was that we really got a feeling of mortality. And I think I was 33 at the time.
Oh, we were young.
We were so young. We were really young. But I think we suddenly realised that actually you've got a finite amount of time, and perhaps it's best spent doing it with something that has more reward than making money for someone else, which is probably what we were doing in the last couple of years of our respective careers.
That's really interesting. That's really powerful stuff, I think. How did you feel, Mark, when you were? At what point did you go over and join Samantha in Sri Lanka? What was your journey to getting over there then?
I was sort of dragged along behind, really. So Samantha left and then started to spend slightly more time in Sri Lanka. I was limited in times to get over here because of sort of being able to get time away from work. And it took me quite some time to sort of follow on, didn't it?
A year or so
13
afterwards.
Months.
Yeah.
But I think part of the thing is we were both sort of quite damaged from that experience, but we didn't necessarily realise it. I think Samantha started healing a little bit quicker than I did because her focus came to looking at the dogs and everything else here, and I dragged along a little bit behind that with just this feeling of morbid gloom a lot of the time, to be fair. Stuck in the treadmill of going into work and everything else and still feeling a lot of those emotions.
When did you make the decision to shift onto this? I mean, anybody that's been anywhere and seen an animal on the street or an animal suffering when they've been on holiday is going to recognize some of what you said. It's something that it's very hard to look away from, and people will sometimes help or feed the animal that they see. But obviously there's a big step between that and hiring a vet for £45 a month and then going up to the next levels that you did. And so at what point did that become a natural progression and you decide that, this is going to be the thing that we do?
It takes a long time. It's incremental, really, because, Sam treated the first dogs, employed this one vet, and that carried on for a little while, actually. And then we helped set that vet up with their own clinic, properly with some equipment and other bits and pieces. And locally, we carried on, started to do low-scale spay neuter. In effect, we provided vouchers and a budget, and that was predominantly funded by us ourselves. And then a few friends and a few people we knew from the work we'd done with rescue dogs in the UK. They started to donate little bits and pieces to it. So you start to do more work. And of course, I think after the first...
It was about 3 years before we were getting money from the public. 3 years before we became a registered charity.
Because again, it was us initially, like then it was us and friends and family.
Yeah.
And then
us and my consultancy paycheck. and I think it's probably around about 2010 that we sort of started to professionalise. We then were running it remotely. I mean, because we're both project managers as well. So
I mean, that time scale is probably about 4 or 5 year time scale.
And we were sort of getting to know the country and the problems. And then it was really in April 2012, we were discussing that we'd really reached a point that there was only so much we could do being out of the country and doing stuff remotely. And we were starting to run some Spay Neuter programs. We had to subcontract another charity to do it because we just weren't here. And it was in 2012 we made the decision that we would move out here. And we'd been going through all the registration procedures to register as an NGO here, which allows you to live and work legally, and we actually moved out in 2013. We actually spent a lot of time learning about why the problems existed in that early stage. And it was part-time. We'd be here for a few months. We'd go back to the UK. We'd earn money. So the sort of full-time where Dogstar switches over is in 2013, into 2014, and that's when we started scaling up to do the mass programs that we do now. And from the one dog in 2006, we're now sterilizing approximately 950 dogs a month.
Wow.
Now, so it's a very different program, but we do actually have some of the same staff. And the very, very first staff member I employed in 2006 still works for us and is one of our supervisors.
Wow, that's amazing.
So in terms of that journey between 2006 and 2013, when you sort of started to scale up even more there, how did you find? You're in a new country. I can imagine new cultures, obviously new language. How are you able to sort of integrate locally with the community as people coming in from the UK into Sri Lanka? How did you find that process, and how did you go about it?
I think very early on, I was very lucky because I was staying with a Sri Lankan family, so that was very helpful. Then we actually rented our own house, which was also in a village, and I think probably the answer is that we lived within the community that.
I mean, it was quite a small village we lived in initially,
and everybody knew everybody. It was a bit like EastEnders. There was one local bar, and everyone used to go to it on Saturday.
We would drink in the local bar. We would buy all our fruit, veggies, and everything else from the little local carday or local shop. And when we had mangoes on the trees in our garden, we would give them to the neighbours, and then they would give us bananas. So you just sort of live the life in the village as such.
And I think, by living in the life in the village, you're living with the people whose dogs are your beneficiaries, but then those people are also your beneficiaries. So I think it's really important, and I think that time that we spent part-time here, we've made Sri Lankan friends, and like learning that has been invaluable to not approaching problems the wrong way, because it's so easy for NGOs or charities to come into another country and just lay over this. In the UK we do, and it doesn't work, and it's incredibly offensive. It's a little bit colonial, to say the least, but it also doesn't work, because what works in one country doesn't work in another. And we often say to people when they say, oh, but there are street dogs everywhere, and you say, yes, because the government has a no-kill policy here. They in 2006 the president said that the killing of street dogs was illegal, and in other countries those dogs are collected by animal control, and after a legal holding period they may be humanely euthanized. So people in those countries aren't aware they have a problem because it's dealt with by officialdom. And But in Asia and in Sri Lanka, because those problems are visible, everybody sees them, and it's very easy for people to judge and to say, "Oh, it's terrible. They've got dogs everywhere." A lot of dogs on the street are owned, so that they're not unsupported. They're not stray dogs. So I think that period of time living in the community, and it really helped us understand how everything fitted together, because it's not just there are dogs on the street. There's a whole reason for why that's the way it is in a different country. And I think if we had come in maybe in 2006 straight away with we're gonna run this huge
yeah, I think
organisation,
we spent a lot of time initially just
Learning.
trying to learn, watching and observing and asking questions and making a conscious decision not to start banging on people's doors saying you must do this
that's
or
really
you must do
important.
that.
Do you feel that your background in project management helped that?
Very much
Very
so.
much so.
Because
yeah.
I think that's one of the key skills that anyone who wants to get involved or is interested in getting involved in animal welfare should really train, because that that idea of your project brief, then you're moving on to do your learning before you go and start even thinking about what sort of intervention you can deliver is so invaluable, isn't it?
I think it is, and I think people often will say to me, "I love your job. It must be great, like playing with puppies all day." And
When is that?
when
exactly?
is that? And also the Spay Neuter program. If you're playing with puppies, you failed. There's a misconception about what it takes to run an organisation, and people say, I really, really love dogs. I'd be good at that, and I really love my own dogs. I have pet dogs, and they're both Sri Lankan rescue dogs, and I love them, and they're my pets. All the other dogs, I have a huge concern about their welfare. I've got a compassion towards them, but I don't love them all, because that would be unrealistic, and would also be just, you wouldn't be a particularly effective project manager if you had like a massive emotional tie to every single animal. I think you have to take that step back and say, this animal's welfare is really important to me, and I want to do a really good job for that animal, but it's from a professional viewpoint. And I think project management gives you that ability to step back. And it's other things. I mean, today we have spent hours at various government meetings to do with all the commissions that we're required to work. Tomorrow we have more government meetings to do with rabies eradication programs we're running. And days will go by where the only dogs I actually see are my own dogs, because we have an amazing team of 25 Sri Lankans that are actually out there doing the work. And as the managers, the people that lead the team, our job is often to do paperwork or things that are not necessarily thought of as being exciting.
Well, at the end of the day, you've
project.
set out the strategy and the plan and everything else, and then it's just working a lot of the time behind the scenes to make sure that it happens, and that the people that are doing the work have the
What they need,
equipment,
yeah.
the facilities, and the support that they need to be carrying it out on a day-to-day basis.
And I think that probably one of the best bits of advice I would give to anyone who says, I want to set up my own charity, is, do you like paperwork? Do you like lots of meetings? Do you like the stresses and strains of senior management? If you really want to be hands-on with dogs, then you are much better volunteering for an existing organisation and doing something that organisation might need, like puppy fostering or puppy walking or cleaning kennels. Or so I think people need to be really honest about what is it they want to get out of it. And running an organisation takes you away from the animals, but it gives you the ability to help the animals. And I think for me, that's the advice that I give. We get asked that a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
It's such an important bit of objectivity that you've obviously brought into it. And that's, I guess, one of the reasons why the project has been a success. But one of the things that I know that you've spoken about before, which is related to that, is because you go through this process, your project, the sterilization, the rabies vaccination, in such a methodical and project management-y kind of way, it makes it a little bit difficult maybe sometimes to appear as sexy as some of the other animal welfare organizations that are all about, like, here's the dog we rescued, here's the sad story. And while the impact that you're having is huge, you've obviously made a very conscious decision to approach it in this way. And so How do you view how you talk about what you do when you're speaking to other people who maybe have a misconception about the kind of work that is animal welfare and rescue?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some really valid observations. One of the first things we get is people will contact us and go, "Can I visit your sanctuary or your shelter or your rehoming centre?" I've had a look on the website, and you go, "Well, you obviously haven't." One. So I think there is this automatic assumption that there must be some sort of holding facility for dogs if you're working with dogs.
I think sometimes people see what they think they want
They
to
project
see.
on
They
what they
kind of project it across,
Yeah,
don't
so
they? Really?
I think if you live in the UK, where there are a number of very successful local and national charities that rehome dogs, and you see those dogs having quite a sad story, or just going into a rescue centre, and then they get advertised on the internet, and a very kind family give them a home. That becomes your benchmark for what you think dog animal welfare is. So a lot of the time, it's just about understanding where the person is coming from and then explaining the differences between where they live and the communities that they might have interactions with, and the communities here and the challenges we have here. And it is difficult. Spay neuter is not an excitable subject.
I think sometimes the emotional element can be missing from some of our work because we're trying to be factual and as scientific as you can by the simple fact of counting the number of dogs and measuring those dogs and keeping monitoring and everything else, so you can explain the percentage of animals that are sterilised and body condition scores and things like that, and trying to do the science behind it. Sometimes that takes away the emotion, or people don't see the emotion because they see the science.
Yeah, and I think we all know that emotion drives giving, particularly with animals and children.
Yeah.
So that can be a challenge. And I think the other thing we try and explain is that we are not saying that what we do is the only way that animals can be helped in any country, at least here. And we work with a lot of Sri Lankan run organisations, and there are some amazing Sri Lankan run organisations that are rehoming puppies. There's a great organisation that's actually looking at pedigree dogs that are discarded from the breeding industry, and they're looking to rehome those. And so we work with lots of those organisations, and we always say if we do our job well, hopefully we reduce the strain on those guys that are really struggling to deal with there being more dogs than good homes available.
Ultimately, overpopulation is the root cause of the issue, many of the issues with animal welfare and everything else.
But it doesn't mean that we would say that what we do is
it's
more
not the be
worthy
all
or
and
better
end all,
than.
no.
And
But,
organisations that look after dogs that have had accidents, organisations that rehome dogs, organisations that are maybe going into schools and talking to children. It's all part of the same process about animal welfare. And I think it's really dangerous if you say, this is my model and only my model works, or my model is better than everyone else's. And we are incredibly grateful for our local Sri Lankan colleagues who run these organisations that do successfully home some dogs. And it can be a bit difficult when we are talking to people because they want the individual dog story.
to be honest, it can be a bit disheartening sometimes, actually, can't it? Because you sit there and you think, wow, we sterilised safely and properly without any after effects 958 dogs last month. And yet all this one person who's emailing me about is concerned about a skinny dog they saw on the beach. And because to them, that skinny dog on the beach brings out the emotion and everything else. And they've got absolutely no interest in the 958 dogs that we've just sterilised.
I think one of the funniest emails we ever had was a lady that had emailed in about a dog, and she sent the photograph, and it actually looked a quite healthy dog and seemed to be well supported by its community. And I'd gone back and I tried to be really rational and sort of explained that we'd sterilised over 11,000 dogs the year before, and how we were working with the local groups that rehome dogs. And she wrote back and went, yes, I think you probably think you're doing a good job, but you really need to build.
You really need to come and cuddle this puppy.
Yeah, but you really need to build a centre so this dog can come and live in it. And I just thought that was quite telling that after everything, she was like, you probably think you're doing a good job, but actually you're not. And I think where we probably sit with people that maybe understand more about the motivation is more in the scientific community, in the universities, major grant givers, larger animal welfare organisations, because they look at impact and sustainability. So it can be that, it can be very difficult sometimes to connect with one individual on Facebook. And, we have a bit of a saying in the office, and I think you've probably heard me say this, Harry, that animal welfare is everything that an individual animal feels and experiences, and its ability to cope in its individual situation. And ethics is what we think about it. And for us, it's really about the animal welfare of the dogs that we are dealing with, because they are our ultimate beneficiaries. And as much as it would be amazing to have a huge social media following, really doing a good job for those dogs is how we can measure our success. I'm not surprised that people sometimes think we're a bit dull. When we write stuff on Facebook, sometimes we actually say, gosh, we really are.
That's boring.
We are being boring. When we talk about a figure like our first major project zone, we worked in the 4th largest city in Sri Lanka. We took the sterilisation rate from 7.9% to over 80%.
Which we think is marvellous and brilliant and so sexy.
But apparently it's not Instagrammable. So it can be a little bit...
Maybe just write that percentage on the side of a cute puppy. And post that picture. And then that way you appeal to both sides of the audience.
I think the next natural step for us now is, what is Dogstar? I know that sounds really silly, but to learn more about the amazing work you're doing. And first of all, I would say that what you're doing is fantastic. So I think a nice place to start with is, you've touched on this very briefly, but when you went there, did you find the Sri Lankans' overall attitude was to dogs? What were the attitudes? What were the barriers you were facing, or what were the positives as well?
I think overall, and obviously it's hard to generalise, because in every situation you're going to find people that love dogs, hate dogs, are cruel to dogs. But overall, there was an acceptance of the dogs being there.
On the street?
Yeah, there was the overriding general, was the acceptance they are community dogs, they're street dogs, they are here. Where people were struggling was with the number of them. So, people would sort of say, I don't dislike dogs, I don't want to be cruel to dogs. I put some food and water out, but there's 20 of them outside my gate, and I can't feed 20, or they're barking at my dog or whatever. So it was really about the sort of sheer numbers were weighing down communities. And we talk a lot about carrying capacity, and we talk about if you have 100 dogs in a village, they all need to have somewhere to sleep and eat and get water. And we know that when carrying capacity is exceeded, welfare decreases, but human tolerance is actually a part of carrying capacity. So, if you're in a village and there are lots and lots of dogs running around and they're barking at night because they're all sexually active and they're keeping you awake, and you've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because you're a bus driver, you're probably not going to be as a huge fan of street dogs as you might be if an intervention has happened and there's less dogs and they're not sexually active. So it's really hard to generalise. We found that the challenges were that people were just overloaded with the number of dogs that they had, or that they were trying to support in their community. Obviously, within those communities, you are going to have people that are cruel to dogs, but that is across every country in the world. Obviously, people that were incredibly kind and loved dogs to a huge extent.
Locally, though, you've got lots of little, England was a nation of shopkeepers, but actually Sri Lanka's a nation of shopkeepers, really. And, all the little cardays beside the road would have little groups of dogs that are outside, because they will feed them as a matter of course, because it's a nice and kind thing to do. And generally speaking, our experience is that people, as Sam said, just accept it.
Whilst there are some people that, and we do get asked, can you take all the dogs away? But overall, most people are, if you can make the balance between people and the dogs more equal, then generally people are not averse to having them there. And obviously, it's a spectrum, so you're going to have people on each end, where people who absolutely adore dogs, and then we know people that absolutely despise dogs with a passion. But you'd probably find that spectrum in any sort of country, and it's just the things that they are worried about are different in different countries. Probably where it gets more tricky is that though everyone is quite happy to feed the dogs, if the individual dog gets sick, then no one person is taking full responsibility to get that dog to, or it might not be possible for
And
them
again,
to do
it's this same level of acceptance, isn't it? Oh, that dog's poorly.
Yeah.
But
just
not necessarily doing anything about it,
and
just accepting
that
it.
might be the fact that there isn't a vet locally, or there isn't the ability for someone to get the dog into a vehicle, or perhaps they can't hire a tuk-tuk that will take the dog, or they're worried if they pick the dog up it might bite them. So there's lots of different reasons for why dogs might not be looked after in the same way that we would think of in a Western country. But it's just understanding how it all fits in together. But we found that the overriding community response to our work is positive. We have lots and lots of people in the community that they will come out, they'll bring their animals, they'll bring their neighbours' animals. When our dog catchers and collection teams are out, they'll be directing us to where animals are. We've had some Benny Hill-esque moments in the fish market where all the local fishermen were trying to help us catch dogs, and it was, I don't know how we
Which
catch
is
the
a
fishermen.
sight to behold.
I honestly don't know how we didn't catch the fishermen because they were instead of the dog. But people are very, very keen. People will flag the vehicles down when they see us, and the staff are in uniform and ask for help. There are lots of local tuk-tuk drivers that regularly stop Mark to show him pictures of their dogs and ask do their dogs need flea treatment. There is a good community response, but within that community, yes, there are people that like dogs and people that don't, and we're probably really aiming at the people in the middle because they're the largest group, and the people who already love dogs we don't need to talk to because they already love dogs. So and then the people that don't, we always say to people, if you love dogs, support what we do, and if you hate dogs, support what we do, because there'll be less of them, they'll be healthier, and your streets will be safer. And your
so we're trying to appeal to two markets, really.
So you've got, you explained absolutely fantastically there. You've got a large population of, I prefer to use the term community dogs as well. I really like that term. So you've got kind of like they're unowned or owned, but they're community dogs. They're being fed maybe. And what I loved was you briefly touched on why people aren't able to solve that problem themselves in that situation. So you then move on to how you're going to solve that problem, and that is your humane dog population management program, and also I can imagine your street dog healthcare program. Just for the listeners, could you just explain that program and what you need to do to tackle an over populated community of dogs, and what do you mean by spay and neutering? Because we know what that means, but maybe not everyone knows what we mean by that, and maybe rabies and the sort of things that you do with that, if that's okay.
And probably Benny Hill as well, but we'll explain that later.
The core of our work is the Spay Neuter program, where basically we are desexing, sterilising male and female dogs that we catch and owners bring to us to prevent them from breeding. So over time, in an area, we work in concentrated areas. In the Gumbo, we divided into 36 zones. We go into an area, we count how many dogs there are, so we know how many dogs we've got on day one. And then there are some debates now, but we've always worked on this 70%. If you sterilise or neuter 70%, Sam is shaking her head at me now because I'm old world.
I think it's much higher.
We think our experience is that it is higher than 70% of animals need to be sterilised in an area to then humanely reduce over time the population. But when we first started doing this, 70% was seen as being the magic figure.
Well, I think it was because it was a vaccination figure that had been proven, so people would often use it. But it's really, we go into these manageable chunks, we count the dogs, we have some amazing international partners. We work with Worldwide Veterinary Service and Mission Rabies, who have developed an amazing mobile phone application that allows us to collect the data. So we will literally go out, our guys are using smartphones to GPS tag all the dogs they see and we ask questions about, what is the dog? Is it a male dog, a female dog? Its age, its body condition, its skin. So that gives us this really good baseline where we say, this particular subsection of this area has 150 dogs and 90+% of them are not sterilised. And then we literally go back in we literally create a project plan. We have teams that then go in, community teams that work sensitizing the community, talking about what we're doing. We will then advertise clinics. We'll actually work with the community to have an area that we can move our mobile surgery truck to. And so literally we will then take the clinics into the community, deliver the program, and then we regularly review how that looks. So we then go back and check, are there new dogs? Have we sterilized sufficient dogs? Is there a decrease in puppies? And then we will move on to different areas, or we'll work and then come back. So it's very much counting how many dogs there are, doing some work, going away, leaving it a little bit of time, seeing how it settles, and then going back if need be. And it's an ongoing process because people bring new dogs in. You don't sterilise them all, so there are some dogs that are being bred, and there are households that won't have their dog sterilised, but when the dog has puppies, they'll dump the puppies on the street. Because in some areas there are people that are culturally sensitive to sterilising, but they don't want to hurt the puppies, so they wouldn't necessarily drown them as you might in other countries. So, but then they'll put them onto the street to give them a chance at living. So that person believes they're being quite compassionate, but obviously from our point of view, they're being quite irresponsible and they're introducing more puppies onto the street. So,
but of course, over the life cycle of that program, because it's not a quick fix, it's a long-term thing. Over the life cycle, if you've got 150 dogs in the zone, over 2, 3, 4 years, that number of dogs will come down, and then the dogs that remain, generally speaking, are healthier because there's more resources locally for those. The males are not running all over the place fighting with each other because there's a female in heat, less of a nuisance to the human population within those zones. And because they're not a nuisance, people are more inclined to feed them. And generally speaking, the dogs are healthier in those areas. So, it's not a quick thing.
No.
It does take time.
How does that, because obviously that leads very, very well into the partners that you work with, and particularly government, national and local, for example. So like projects like this can't work in isolation, and you need the support of local government and local representatives, which clearly you have. But how did they approach you, or how did you approach them? And what was their view of you coming in and proposing this and dealing with, as you said, like an issue that affects the community? They obviously have legislation in place. You mentioned before that there's a no-kill policy, but clearly they either didn't prioritize it or didn't have the capacity to work on it. So how did they view you coming in, and how did you manage to build that collaborative relationship that I guess you must have now with the government?
Yeah, so that there have been since 2006 a number of national spay neuter programs run in Sri Lanka, and they've been under different departments, and it's moved from the health ministry to animal back to health ministry. And one of the problems we all face here is that there aren't as many vets per sort of person or per dog in the country as there would be in other countries. We have one veterinary university that trains between sort of 50 to 80 vets a year in a country of 21 million people. The resources in the spay neuter have been quite thin. So one of the things that we've tried to do is to accepting that none of us have enough vets, that we've looked at building our program to try and show how a concentrated program in one area could deliver really good sustainable results, because all of us have the same issues with we don't have enough veterinary staff that can be allocated to this straight away, because they're working in other fields, or because more traditionally the methods of spay neuter were to go to different villages on different weeks of the year. So what the partners that we've worked with, we've said, look, we're going to take a slightly different approach to it, and what we're going to do is show you how, using this project management tools, we're going to try and, with the shortest amount of intervention, get you the largest impact. And because we are working, we have a fantastic veterinary team here. What we're trying to do is to create something that is replicable, so that any group of Sri Lankan vets and assistants and project managers can replicate what we're doing and see the same levels of success. And I think that's really where we're coming at it from. And I think another piece of advice I would really give if you're going to work somewhere is don't cut corners, don't try and do things underhanded. We went to the mayor's office in the city, spoke to the commissioner, we got all the permissions to work. And, 3 or 4 years later, they're at meetings telling people, oh, we had this NGO in and they did a really good job for us. And then that gets the ear of someone else who says, actually, I'd like to talk to these guys. So I think by being sort of above board, doing it well, and keeping all the stakeholders involved means that as political sort of will changes and different departments get involved,
you get a level of consistency
that
still,
you move between.
Otherwise you would lose.
And I think that's really important. And again, that's a lot of what Mark and I do, is spending time talking to our local government partners and also understanding the challenges that they have, and can we actually help with that. And a lot of the meetings that we have are based on us all being very honest with each other. We're transparent to them. They feel they can be transparent to us, and then we can work together to fix the problem. And I think it's really important not to be critical if a government are struggling with something, because obviously for us, we're animal welfare people. Animal welfare is very important to us, but we might be dealing with a department, the health department we deal with has responsibility for 2.4 million people in their area, and they have to provide hospitals and midwifery services and services for vaccination for children and services for elders. So whilst animal welfare is really important to us, it's one thing that they have to do, and they have a budget to deliver all of those things. So it's really important to go wide in your thinking and understand that what may be really important to you is not going to be the absolute most important thing to the person in front of you. And I think if you can do that, you get a lot more out of your interactions with them.
I mean, it's just amazing work. Looking back at 2006, when you went down this journey, what do you now, looking back through those years that have gone by, what have you loved most about the work you've done? And also, do you think you've changed as people? And if so, how? I know, good question, eh?
Crikey, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, the funny thing is, so we record all the data and everything else, and we've got Excel spreadsheets and everything else coming out of our ears, telling us how many dogs we've done in this area, that area, how many males, females, how many owner brought, and everything else. But quite often we don't look back. So sometimes we look in awe when we do every now and then look at a report and think, my God, we've actually rabies vaccinated that many dogs, or that many vaccinations, we've sterilised that many dogs and so many in this area. And it's quite shocking when you look back at it, really, and you think, how on earth did we do that? So it's a bit of an eye-opener.
What have you enjoyed the best? Don't say your days off.
Yeah. I had this dream once of retiring to a tropical island.
How's that working out for you, Mark?
And I think I now work more hours and work harder than I ever did on the railway.
I think we probably do for better results.
I mean, it is amazing to look back and see what's been done. It's scary then to look forward and think how much more still needs to be done. It's truly remarkable to look back. I mean, Sam mentioned that the original person that worked for Dogstar from 2006 still works for Dogstar now, and now manages a team of other people and does things. It's quite remarkable to look at that as well, and that brings a tremendous amount of pride.
I think, for me, my favourite bit of it has to be the building the team. I think, so Sampath, he was actually my tuk-tuk driver. And he used to take me to the temples when I was like feeding these dogs, these original dogs, and he would get out and help me. And bit by bit, got more and more involved. And now he's a supervisor and an amazing guy that is just absolutely blossomed.
Odd little things, isn't it? Sometimes, really. Crikey. It's the little things that are sometimes really nice. So you'll be standing at a clinic, and you've got a pen with dogs in it that are waiting for surgery or recovering from surgery, And one of the team members will go in completely unexpected and will just sit there and start stroking a particular dog and things like that. Or when a dog's put on a prep table to be prepared for surgery, and one of the handlers starts stroking the dog's ears
Even though
or
it's
things like that.
unconscious.
Yeah, and you just stand there and think, well, actually, that's really, really nice, and it's something to actually be quite proud of, really, in a very simple and very small way. But it is quite sweet and quite nice.
I mean, I think definitely for me, it's the team, and it's giving people that already liked animals and the opportunity to work in that field. All our staff really do like animals. There is a stereotype, and it's often perpetuated by foreign charities that all people in another country are evil or don't like dogs or are horrible to dogs, and that they're stupid, and that there's only the great white saviour NGO can come in and save the animals. And I think for us to see our staff, and like Mark said, watching somebody that is stroking an unconscious dog, and they're not doing it because they're being observed, they're just doing it because the other guy is doing something to the dog, and they're just stroking it, even though it's unconscious at that point. That just demonstrates their sort of commitment to what they do. And I think that's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of, and that I think is the most visible thing that you can see if you come and actually see the work that we do.
That's so lovely. And the bird in the background is very appreciative of it as well.
The birds are coming in. Have we changed people?
I guess we must have changed as people, really. In what ways, I'm not sure. I mean, I think working in a foreign country and everything else, you learn patience, maybe. Am I more patient than I used to be? I'm not sure. I must be. I must be.
I think you must be. You've probably had a stroke.
I'll tell you one thing it has done. It's made us older. Look back at some of the pictures
of us about 6 years ago, and I'm like, wow.
Certainly aged.
I mean, I'm 47, and someone asked me recently if I was drawing my UK state pension.
Ouch!
Yeah, that was quite confronting, and that was someone from England. So,
how hard did you hit them?
Using the patience that we've learned. Probably, I think maybe what motivates us has changed. I think when we worked in the corporate sector, we were both high-earning individuals. Boy, that's not happening now.
No.
And we were very driven by performance equals a bonus. Performance equals, getting some sort of internal award. And I think now that, probably what motivates us is, those little things like seeing the staff do well at the clinic, or when the staff deal with a particular situation that's difficult, or when you go out and you drive through the fish market and you might drive past 20 dogs over a 10-minute drive, and every single one of them has got an ear tip, which means that it's been sterilised. That's a tiny section of its ear that's taken out.
I mean, not that we're sad or anything else like that, but something driving around, oh, that's one of ours, that's one of ours, that's one of ours. That one's still with its collar on, and it's so that brings a lot of joy.
Yeah. And I think that they're the things that probably motivate us now. I think, that are different to the things that used to make. Success looks different to us now.
If you had the opportunity to speak to the Sam and Mark in 2006, the you that didn't know what you were letting yourselves in for, the yous that saw this opportunity but had no idea where it was going to lead, what advice would you give yourselves now, knowing what you know and having seen what you've seen and the successes that you've had, and obviously the things that you've had to overcome? What bits of advice would you give yourselves?
I think my advice would have been, you can do it. Because I think if I had known what I knew now, if I had known what the journey was going to look like, my default would have been, I can't do it. I absolutely can't do it. So that would be the first thing that actually is possible. I think probably the advice that I would have given myself would have been to use your business skills more, and to use your project management earlier. I think I almost thought it had to be a separate life. I was like, I've put that away, and now I'm going to do.
We did think that, because the day I retired from the railways, I almost cast everything from the railways out of my mind. And then it was a while after, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
We suddenly came up with visualization boards for the wards,
The way
for
that we
managing
manage
things and
things,
everything else, which
yeah.
were all project management tools that we'd learnt on the railways.
I think using skills that you have in other parts of your life, and the animal welfare as a career or as a profession is not standalone and separate from other things. So you need to be a good manager, you need to be a good negotiator, you need to be a good listener in the HR department, and all those things. And everybody has skills that they've learned in other parts of their life. So I would say, you use those earlier, and also maybe to have believed in it a bit more, because at the beginning I would never have seen it that it could expand the way that it has, and I think it is that very slow burn.
I mean, the other one is run for the hills.
You said that before, don't you?
Because, we started off to employ a vet to treat some dogs, and then it's you do a few sterilisations as well, because locally there's too many dogs. And at no point, really, certainly in the early days, was a strategic plan
No.
put together
Mm.
to say, right, well, eventually what we're going to do, we're going to be sterilising 1,000 dogs a month and rabies
Yeah,
vaccinating
that-
1,000 dogs a month. And so incredible. We never set out to be a charity, never set out to be an NGO as such. It all kind of evolved out of necessity as we went through. So possibly the one piece of advice I would give the 2006 mark is look ahead and think what it could achieve and start planning
for
it
that
now.
That's good advice. How many animals have you treated altogether, vaccinated and sterilized? Do you know?
There's about 64,000 individual rabies vaccinations.
and that's in support
Wow.
of rabies.
That's in support with Mission Rabies.
Fantastic.
There's been about 45,000 sterilisations across the whole of the country.
Amazing.
And, crikey.
Individual treatments are going to
Individual
be
treatments.
probably twice, probably coming close to 100,000
It's probably because
from
and that's everything varying from flea treatments, worming treatments, to hospital treatments and leg amputations and things like that, really. So, I mean, I find the numbers vast, to be honest, because we never set out to do that as such. It was just, help a few dogs.
set out to help one dog called Mango and her monk. And
But,
that was it.
we've been very lucky as well. Ultimately, we got advice from people early on, which you well know, Harry, because we spoke to you before we kicked off the sort of big Spay Neuter stuff.
Yeah, and you were still a success.
Dogs Trust supported us and tremendously supportive.
Worldwide.
And I say, Mission Rabies with the rabies support, WVS and everything else. So we have been very lucky as well.
The networking and the conferences we've been to and the people that we've met over the years. That's been a huge...
Yeah, because we made some mistakes early on. And some of those mistakes were we didn't go to events.
Because we thought we were too small.
We thought, one, we were too small, two, they were too expensive. But actually, we realised that we missed out on so much additional help, knowledge,
in the first maybe 2
and information in the first couple of years, because the first couple of years we did become our own little silo.
And I think, certainly if I was giving advice to other people, it's certainly network, do conferences, do online training, online conferences, just get involved with other groups that are working in the same areas, either geographically or the same cause, because there is a huge amount you can learn from people. And people will share their mistakes with you as well. We've all made them. And that's fine. You don't have to know it all. None of us, very few people sort of leave school and go, that's it, I'm going to be an animal welfare professional. Most of us find our way to it via other things, for a variety of reasons. And people come into the profession at different ages for different reasons. So there's always somebody that will know more than you. And there's always somebody that you can give a help up to or just a bit of advice to, because you've been there. And that can make a big difference to them.
And whatever that bird is, it's agreeing.
Yeah.
That is a bird with some very strong opinions. What can people do? Anybody listening to this, what can they do to help you, support you, find out more about your work?
So visit the website, which is www.dogstarfoundation.com.
which will be in a link in the description of this podcast.
Click the link. I mean, people can obviously your sort of traditional financial support. Donate is obviously amazing and very, very helpful, particularly small monthly donations. They make a huge difference for planning. But there are also other things people can do, Facebook, donate your birthday. Liking and sharing on social media is actually an incredibly helpful
Powerful
thing.
way of helping, actually, us as a group.
So it's really, if you're coming to Sri Lanka, to sort of support the local groups here, and there are many. So you can Google and find out who's working in the area that you're visiting. And if you are sort of visiting in Asia, I think if you one of the things that we find people can really do, we work with a number of hotels in our local area who are very supportive, and they've got signs up saying that they support our work. And I think if you are traveling and you find a good animal friendly hotel or a bar restaurant, it's giving those guys a good TripAdvisor review, because it really rewards them for being good guys, and it helps progress other people coming on board. So there's a whole range of things that people can do to help us and to help Sri Lankan dogs and to help the whole profession in general. We've always said that nobody is too small to make an individual difference somewhere. So, no matter, it can be really overwhelming. It can seem like there's just so many dogs everywhere. What do you do? And you support a charity, support us, support another charity working in this sort of field. Just help somebody locally who's helping a dog. And it's if everybody does something, it really does add up. And we talk about it as a ripple effect, don't we? That one action has a ripple, and that ripple is sort of kindness and compassion, and it spreads out, and then it encourages more people to get involved. So never feel that you're too small to
There's a ripple effect from Bandarika International Airport.
Yes, it's a very large plane.
That was a great show. No, it wasn't even a show.
That was really,
yeah,
it was really good, wasn't it? They're such a lovely couple.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. I have heard of Dogstar, obviously, but to actually hear their personal story is so powerful, and really inspirational.
And I thought the bird, I mean, what that bird added to the whole conversation, to the whole interview, I think was just brilliant. What that bird had to say about their work.
I was talking about the bird.
Yeah.
The bird was inspiration.
Oh, yeah. The bird was the best part of that part. Sorry, Sam. Sorry, Mark. But that bird was, we're having the bird back next week for its own podcast.
Pitch perfect as well. The way
absolutely it was.
Brought a lump in my throat out, and hairs on the end of my arms stood on end. I was goosebumps. Harry, I had goosebumps.
It was moving. It was deeply moving. To hear firsthand the story of that bird was beautiful. But actually, who do we have on the podcast next week?
Well, Harry, I'm glad you asked. For episode 5, we're going to be speaking to the fantastic Trent Gracian, who is essentially a researcher, Harry, isn't he, Trent? And he's been running some amazing projects and studies into how, if you want, you can get more people to turn to a vegan diet. What are the barriers? Who are the target market? And his work has been absolutely fantastic, and it's very pioneering from a human behavior change point of view.
Absolutely. Yeah. He looks at the reasons why people do or don't choose to become vegan or vegetarian, or why they stay, or their eating habits, and what are the human behaviors and attitudes within all of us that lead us to make those kinds of decisions, and the thought processes that are involved in it. And he's done some, as you said, some pretty pioneering research in that. Really looking forward to speaking to him. I say that like we haven't already spoken to him. We've actually already spoken to him. So I'm looking forward to re-listening to the conversation that we've already had with him.
You're looking forward to editing it, Harry. You're looking forward to editing it.
No, I'm actually not looking forward to editing it, but I am looking forward to listening to the final edit, because it was a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
Trent, a lovely guy, really, really interesting to speak to. So if anybody, all of you who are listening, especially Charlotte 2631 in Colombia, wherever you are, this is the next podcast. This is going to be one you don't want to miss. So if anybody wants to listen to it, what do they need to do, Matt?
Well, they can check us out on our Podbean website at animalchat.podbean.com. They can also download and listen to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, all those. And
anywhere you listen to a podcast, you will find us.
We are there. And please get in touch with us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Let us know what you're thinking. Touch base with Harry and I. But always, please remember, share, like, subscribe, 5-star reviews, please. It'll help us be able to reach more people with our podcast and keep getting everyone to listen to our absolute nonsense, Harry, that we speak.
Oh, you're starting to sound more desperate now.
I've got no shame in this, Harry.
It was going so well, and then you started begging, and it was actually making me feel a bit dirty. But I think.
Okay. So basically, do all that crap that I just said, and but as always, thank you for listening.
Yeah, and see you next time, everyone.
See you next time. Bye.